Hey guys, hope everything's well with you. We missed you just as much as we know you missed us. Today we got just as special a guest as any other day, probably a little more though. We got the mayor of Elizabeth with us. Really happy to have you here today, or really happy to be here, of course. And I think we should start it off. Thomas,
I'd love to start off. First of all, fun fact: we actually went to your high school, J. Christian Bollwage Finance Academy. Yeah. We actually graduated from there when it changed from Academy of Finance to your high school. I've always wondered, how did that happen?
First of all, I'm thrilled to hear you guys graduated high school.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very
Just
much.
kidding, Barry. Just kidding, Thomas.
I took it as it is.
I don't know. I didn't have anything to do with the changing in the name.
Yeah.
It was like an honor.
Yeah, exactly. It was nothing that I was prepared for. It kind of came as a surprise.
Right.
The Board of Education on one night was picking names for schools, and they chose to name that school after me because that school was originally named after William Halloran, who was a longtime principal many years ago in our city. And then when they built a new school right next to that building, and they kept the Halloran name in the new school.
Right.
And then they converted that school to a finance academy.
Okay. And we know that you come from Elizabeth as well. Which high school was it that you went to?
So I was born and raised in the North End part of town, up near the airport.
Okay.
On North Avenue, right across the street from the North Avenue Bakery.
Yeah.
I went to Blessed Sacrament Grammar School.
Wow.
In that section of the community, which is about 4 blocks from my house.
Yeah.
Then I went to St. Mary's High School.
Okay.
As of now, this podcast, we have no Catholic schools in the city.
Right.
Where we used to have 14 Catholic grammar schools and 3 Catholic high schools. We have none.
What do you think changed?
Well, I don't think the Archdiocese emphasizes Catholic education anymore.
Yeah.
The cost of Catholic education has become somewhat onerous on the Archdiocese, not only in our county, in our area, but throughout. But I still think it's the Archdiocese's fault.
Right.
They don't focus on Catholic education. I think Catholic education, or any type of special education, is always good competition for public schools. There's nothing wrong with it.
Right. And we know one thing that Thomas pointed out to me before we came in to see you today was that there was a noticeable, because we looked on your page on Wikipedia, on your info before.
I don't believe everything they said. They got me a lot older than I am.
Really?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll let you get back to your question.
Yeah, there was a noticeable gap between the time that you went to high school.
So for reference, it said that you graduated from St. Mary's 1972, and then it said you went to Kane and you received your bachelor's at 1981, and then it says you got your master's at 1989. So my question was, what did you do during those gaps?
So from 1972 to 1981, I was actually going in and out of school. I did not have the luxury of having parents pay for my education.
Right.
Tell you a quick story. My father was a letter carrier. My mother stayed at home. My father offered to pay for my education and figure out a way if I completed my college degree in 4 years.
Yeah.
However, after high school, I was a bartender. I tended bar at local pubs, not only here, but some down the Jersey Shore. I tended bar for private parties. So I was always had a few bucks in my pocket, dropped out of college, and did not continue my college education. When I decided to go back to get a college degree, my father said, well, I think that's great, but you're going to have to figure out a way to pay for it yourself, as well as pay me back for the 2 years in which I invested in you that you didn't finish.
Really?
Because we had an agreement. You didn't keep up your end of the agreement. So I paid him back for the 2 years during time, as well as paid for myself for the rest of the college education. That's why I took it to 1981 to get a bachelor's degree. Yeah. During that time, I attended bar. At one of the bartending stints, a woman was pregnant with child and worked at Sealand. All of the bosses in Sealand used to come into the bar that I worked. Mm-hmm. They liked my bartending skills, and they said, hey, why don't you come to Sealand and work for 4 months while this woman gives birth and then raises and bonds with her child. I did. I worked at Sealand in the shipping industry. I liked it, and that was the modus operandi for getting me back to college, so I didn't tend bar for the rest of my life, and I became a white-collar job in the shipping industry at Sealand. Then I worked for Puerto Rico Marine Management, and then after that I worked for a company owned by the Spanish government called Transatlantica Spanish Lines, and they shipped cargo back and forth between here and Barcelona and other ports in Spain.
Oh wow, I was just in Barcelona.
Yeah,
I just
that's
came back
funny.
like last week.
I've never been to Barcelona.
You should.
I've been north in Spain. I've been to Madrid. I've been to San Sebastian and that area, but never been to Barcelona and south.
Wow. All right. So,
So that's
Oh,
the
wait,
reason
quick-
for that gap.
Quick question though. So what did you major in?
So my
Right.
undergraduate degree is in economics. And then when I received my undergraduate degree and I was working, I then went nights to get my graduate degree, which was in a master's degree in public administration. I was elected to the city council in 1982. So rather than get more of a business degree or more in economics, I studied public administration and achieved my master's or graduate degree in 1989.
okay.
Also, what type of student were you during high school?
Not a good one,
Really?
no.
More of a people's person?
So I'm the kind of person that hid my transcripts and my grades from my daughter. I wanted to make sure my daughter never saw her dad's grades in high school.
Yeah.
Because if she did, I didn't want her to think that you could do that poorly in high school and still succeed and be the mayor as long as I've been the mayor.
Right.
So I hid those grades from her. She never saw them.
Okay. And speaking of how long you've been the mayor, over 30 years now. Congratulations on that. What were some of your most proudest moments in between this 30 years?
So I served on the city council for 10 years from 1983 to 1992 when I ran for mayor. And part of our slogan in 1992 was a lot of other cities experienced economic development and job creation at the end of the 80s. We had a recession sometime between, don't quote me on the dates, but I'll say it on the air, sometime between 81 and 85. I could be off a year or two.
Right.
And then the economy started to turn around, and a lot of cities were doing well in the late 80s and early 90s, not Elizabeth. We didn't move forward at that time, and I always thought that we could have positioned ourselves better coming through the recession in order to create economic development and stimulate jobs. So that's what I ran on. And
Yeah.
two Danish guys walked into my office in 1993 and said, "We just bought your garbage dump for $10 million. I said, "And what are you going to do with that?" He says, "Well, we're going to make it a mall." I said, "It's a 166-acre landfill on the waterfront that was vacant and dormant for 20 years.
Wow.
The last time anybody dumped garbage there was 1971. And here they go and they buy it. They say, "Well, Mayor, what do you want? What can I do?" And I'm like, "Well, Mayor, here's what we need from you. We want you to build a road to the dump so we can get the heavy equipment in there, remediate it, put a wall in the ground, basically
Yeah.
a wall, to prevent the leachate from going out into the Arthur Kill or anywhere else." And I said, "How much is that road going to cost?" I asked my folks, and they said about $7 to $10 million. So I said to these guys, "You want me to build a road to a mall
Yeah.
and then run for re-election? I mean, build a road to a dump and
Right.
then run for re-election?" They said, "Yeah, well, we're going to build a mall." And I said, "Well, if you don't build that mall, I'm going to be really one silly-ass mayor
Yeah.
trying to build a road to a dump." Well, we took a chance. I asked the city council for the $10 million to build that road. We built it, and if you look at the Jersey Gardens today, it created somewhere between 500 and 1,000 to 1,500 construction jobs,
Yeah.
and there's about 2,000 jobs out there today with all the hotels and everything else
Right.
that we developed that site. That site was paying the city of Elizabeth about $60,000 a year, and now pays the city of Elizabeth well over $7 million a year
Wow.
in ratables and sales tax revenue.
Yeah, that was my first job in there too,
Yeah.
at the
There you go.
Aero Pastel.
Now look at you guys.
Right.
Yeah.
Talking to the mayor.
See that?
Yeah.
But I think that really blends well into the question of something I wanted to ask you was about who who is on your team? Who are some of the people in your time and your tenure that have helped you the most, whether it be personal or business related?
So getting to where I got to be honest with you, certain teachers were instrumental. Dr. Dawood Farahi, who eventually became the president of Kane University, was one of my professors when I was getting my graduate degree. He's now retired. A couple of the guys, Dr. Kelly and Dr. Daly. Dr. Daly is deceased. Those two gentlemen were some of my professors in my graduate degree who were influential.
Right.
What do you feel like you learned from them or picked up from them?
Discipline was one.
Yeah.
The ability to, because I told you earlier, I wasn't exactly the best student in the world. So
Yeah, you did.
Discipline from them in order to do my studies was important, and focus. When I became the mayor, I put together a team of people. The city attorney is still with me, Bill Holzapfel. He was a great influence in conducting things the right way and doing government business. At that time, Senator Ray Lesniak, who's now retired, was a huge help in everything that I attempted to do here in the city of Elizabeth. Governor Jim Florio was the governor when I first ran for office. He was he just passed away last year, but he was extremely supportive in 1992. And I had a very good relationship with Governor Florio, Senator Lesniak. And then as time went on, Senator DeFrancesco, who eventually became governor, was instrumental. And Governor McGreevey, I worked really closely with the Governor Whitman's administration. And then later on, Governor Corzine, and now Governor Murphy. The only one that I had a really bad relationship with was Governor Chris Christie, because I didn't think he was an honest person or a fair person in dealing with mayors throughout the state of New Jersey.
Right. And speaking of the governors, I believe it was the governor on an article I read that spoke well of you about you recently becoming commissioner of Port Authority.
Governor Murphy appointed me
right.
to be a commissioner at the end of January this year.
Congratulations on that.
And then the Senate, under the leadership of Senator Nick Scutari, who is our senator from Linden, a neighboring district, worked to confirm me through the state Senate.
Right.
That occurred at early March of this year.
Yeah.
So I've only been to 3 meetings. I have my 4th meeting coming up this week.
Right.
So I'm learning. It's a learning process.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
But it's an interesting bi-state agency with an awful lot of resources. And keep in mind, they're the transportation hub of this area.
And is that nerve-wracking at all for you? Probably not, with all your experience and whatnot.
Well, it's a learning curve. I wouldn't call it nerve-wracking. The only thing I get nervous about is going on boats. Other than that,
Me too. I don't know why.
I'm not a big boat guy, so other than that, I go on them. But nervous is not an issue. It's reading, understanding, comprehension.
Yeah.
And going back to those professors I had, it's discipline as well.
Of course. And also something else I wanted to ask you about your job was the work-life balance. How is that for you? Is there even a work-life balance, or is the job your life as well?
So it was early on until I first ran for mayor in 1992, and then I was married in 1995, and our daughter came along in the year 2000. So that clearly changes the focus, as having a child. But up until 1995, being married, it was all about government and politics and showing up as many places as I can. Before Jacqueline came around, I still maintained that schedule, that whatever government could do. My wife at the time understood that because I was the mayor when we got married.
Yeah.
Jacqueline, however, changes things a lot. I mean, because you want to be with your daughter and do as many things as you can, and it all becomes about seeing her succeed as opposed to me anymore. I've been there, done that. So my goal at this stage is to make sure that she has an ability to succeed.
Okay, that's beautiful, man. And speaking of your focus shifting, do you see yourself retiring anytime soon?
No.
That's even more beautiful.
No, in 2024, I would stand for my 9th term before the voters, and
Yeah.
I plan to do that.
I was also thinking, I noticed that your predecessor, Thomas G. Dunn, he did, don't quote me, but he had did something like 20 something.
28 years, 7 terms.
Are you looking to beat him?
I already did.
Oh, right. He already did. It's
I'm
30.
In my, I'm
He's
in my
Oh.
middle of my 8th
Yeah,
term.
you
Wow.
already did beat him.
Yeah, so you got to do a little more research then.
No.
It's just
I'm
messing with
kidding
the
you
numbers.
there, Thomas.
Yeah.
I'm kidding you.
top 20 in the country you are for longest running terms right now. Number
And
19.
if you look at cities that are over 100,000, I'm the first.
Wow.
Yeah, there's nobody serving longer in cities over 100,000 people.
Do you ever, like, when you're home, like, ever think about this, that, like, you're number one in the country for this, that you've done this for so long?
No, when I'm home, I'm watching a baseball game or a sporting event or reading a newspaper,
Yeah.
talking to my daughter about her day at work or having dinner with my wife or something like that.
Right.
No, I'm never thinking of legacies or anything like that.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to give this up, so why think of a legacy?
Yeah, and the more you think about it, it can just be a distraction.
I think about having hair like you, though.
Oh, don't
I
do
wish I
that,
had
man.
hair. That's what I think about. Or you. That's what I like to think about.
That means the world. And I'm
So you said you also grew up in Elizabeth. What are some key changes you feel like you've noticed from growing up in Elizabeth to now?
Well, technology, Thomas, is one.
Yeah.
So you guys, you're in your 20s, right? So
Yeah.
You've lived technology. I mean, you grew up with cell phones in your hip pocket.
right.
You grew up with computers and QR codes and all of that at your fingertips.
Yeah.
I didn't have that.
Right.
And when I first became the mayor, I had a cell phone. It was the size of a shoe, and it was in my car. It was like
It was like a brick, right?
it was huge. It was the size of a shoe.
Yeah.
You know, you might remember. You don't remember it, but people my age remember a TV show called Get Smart, where there was a clown show about CIA agents, and they had these wacky phones that you could talk through your shoe. But that's basically what the cell phones looked like in the 80s and early 90s.
Yeah.
Because I was in
Inconvenient.
sales and marketing, so I had one
Really? You were in sales and marketing?
in the 80s in a corrugated business when I was working to get my master's degree on the city council.
Okay.
So I had this cell phone, and it was in my car. So you talk about technology changes over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
You've had it at your fingertips. I've watched it evolve. And, I have a great staff headed by Ruby and others who
Right.
deal with Instagram and Facebook. I don't go on any of that stuff because I don't have the time.
Yeah.
And number two, I'd be lost trying to figure it all out.
Right.
So they go on it and they keep track of it. And people complain on social media and we try to answer them. And I got to tell you, we didn't have anybody doing that kind of work in the 1990s.
Yeah.
And now we have 3 and 4 people sometimes when it gets busy. Like during COVID,
Yeah.
Ruby and Kelly, who were here, literally spent hours and 20 hours a day answering people's issues on social media.
Yeah.
Dealing with COVID. I mean,
That's insane.
we could show you the number of answers is just absolutely phenomenal. Ruby told me one day that we put out messages. 100,000 people were following the messages in
Yeah.
a couple of days' time. That's remarkable.
Yeah, that's something else. Speaking of COVID, considering it feels like 2020 to now was just one long year, how
I'm glad you think that way, Darian.
huh?
I'm glad you think that way.
Yeah, I'm not the only one, I'm sure. How was it for you? Not only working past it, but living past it, being just as regular as all of us,
So you're like calling me old and thought I should have died during COVID. I mean,
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
I think that's the way you meant it, right? Like,
No,
how the
no.
hell did you live through this?
I have no idea how I did.
So COVID was a scary time for many people.
Yeah.
And it evolved really quickly. When COVID hit in China in January,
Yeah.
people never thought it would get here. And then in February, when it did get here, people were like, it's contained on the West Coast. And then as we know, on March 20th, the world shut down for most Americans.
Right.
I had lunch that weekend with the acting prosecutor here, And that Monday, she calls me. She said, I feel really, really sick. I hope I didn't infect you. And we had lunch and gave each other a hug when she left. And I got tested. And it took 2 weeks for my results to come back. I came back negative. So I didn't get it from her. She survived it, but she was very sick for a good month.
Right.
And I didn't get it from her, but I'm like, wow. So we shut City Hall down for the most part. Everybody kept somebody here. The building was open for customers, clients who may have come in and needed something.
Yeah.
But it was very, very little. I was here in City Hall every day during COVID, dealing with phone and dealing with the press and dealing with social media. Even at night at home, I would be talking with folks on how to answer things. Learned an awful lot about it. Spoke with Dr. Fauci one day about it. I was going for a heart exam, and I had to get tested for COVID before I went.
Yeah.
And I tested positive in between shots.
Wow.
So that's when I was on the phone with Dr. Fauci. I said, if you get your first shot, when do you get your second shot?
Yeah.
And he said, get it as scheduled. So I could have got the shot the first day we got him in Elizabeth. The hospital had him. They said, Mayor, you want to be first? I said, no, let's get nurses, doctors, healthcare folks, police, fire. One of the things that we did early on was I asked the city council for $60,000 to buy the freezers. So we bought 2 freezers at minus 20 degrees and 1 at minus 80 degrees because that was necessary, and all of the gloves and equipment that's necessary to reach in those freezers. And then when the vaccine was approved, I was on the phone with the governor's office saying, we have the freezers, we have the equipment, we want to be one of the first cities to get vaccines. We had them Christmas week and started giving out vaccines in Christmas week of 2020,
Right.
which was remarkable.
Yeah.
And keep in mind that virus hit in March of 20, and then the vaccines were ready at the end of 20, early 21 is when we started giving them out.
Right. Wow. That was definitely a time.
Yeah, it was.
It was a pretty heady time. It was, we had policemen get sick. We lost one city employee, a public works employee succumbed to COVID. And we married a police officer who had a couple of kids and was deathly sick with COVID and was going to get ventilated. And we married him through a window at the hospital in case he passed away, that the mother of his children would be able to get the benefits. He survived, and he's back to work.
That's beautiful.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
So a lot of unique circumstances. during that
Stories.
time. Oh, there's a lot more stories too.
Of course.
But you guys can't have me on forever. You gotta
No, we
gotta
can't.
go on to more interesting guests.
I don't know who to get after this.
Yeah,
honestly.
right. No, we know. Don't make us sound like some chumps.
yeah, you'll get somebody.
And speaking about all these stories, I guess since, the time is running up too, we basically wanted to ask if you would share with us some of your goals that you got, since we know you're not retiring now.
So one of the things, the struggles of today are different than the struggles of when I first got here.
Right.
When I first got here, there were open air drug markets. There were a lot of activity for sales of drugs and causing problems on the streets. With cell phones and everything, that's all moved indoors. You don't have a lot of drug sales on the open corners anymore.
Right.
That doesn't mean there's not drug sales and there's not gangs and there's not people that run it.
Yeah.
They're just doing it indoors.
Yeah.
A lot more than they're doing it outdoors. You don't have drive-by shootings that you used to have.
That's a smart
In the
observation.
90s. That doesn't mean the problem's gone away. It's just moved indoors. But today, if you look now, 30 years later, mental illness among young people is a real challenge. And how do you deal with that issue? We have the Arrive program. We have a 24-hour hotline service that young people could call and get advice.
Right.
So that's one of the issues. How do you deal with homelessness? More and more people are homeless because they're getting priced out of rents, getting priced out of housing. How do you deal with those issues? If the government doesn't deal with it, private industry is not gonna.
Right.
And the more homeless facilities you build, you're never gonna have enough. So it's a structural issue. The immigration issue is an issue as well. Those issues didn't exist 30 years ago.
Right.
And schooling.
Mhm.
You know, we had, when I first became the mayor, we had, I don't know how many students, probably 10 or 12,000 students in the whole system. We have over 30,000 students in the whole system now.
It's crazy.
And every year it's just more and more.
It gets
more
more.
and
And,
more.
Yeah.
and if you come here and you're not documented, that doesn't mean you don't get an education. We still have to provide an education for you, and I think it's a good thing. I don't think young kids should have to deal with the issues that their parents have now subjected them to by escaping a dictatorship or harassment or drug lords in foreign countries.
Yeah.
They should still get an education.
Well said. I agree.
Yeah. I'm probably asked like one more question because we're running out of time. But just to end it off on a good note, how do you find peace in all you do? Since you're such a busy man, like, what do you do to find peace? And like, who are you outside of work?
Well, who am I outside of work?
Yeah, like, what do you like
That's
to do
a really
outside
good. That's a really good question because I never have to answer that question.
Okay.
That's a good way to close it
That's a
because
good
you'll
way-
never
yeah,
want to
'cause
close.
It's a question. It's not normally asked, nor do I deal with who I am outside of work, right? So, I mean, I'm just a regular guy outside of work. I take out the garbage. You know,
Yeah.
Family man.
Yeah, well, yeah.
You said you like baseball.
I like baseball. I go to baseball games or watch it on television.
Right.
I enjoy playing golf.
Okay.
So I'm always angry because I think I can get better, and I can't. So unless I play every day, and I don't have the luxury
Right.
of playing every day. So it's kind of like being somebody outside of work. I enjoy dinner. I enjoy wine. I enjoy socialization. Other than that, you know, when I'm outside of work, I'm outside of work. I'm just me.
Yeah.
Whatever me is. And that's an evolving equation.
Oh wow, that was well said. I'm saving some of the things you're saying in my brain.
You can use them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm a what was it? I'm a what
An
equation?
evolving equation.
Evolving equation. And on
That's gonna be my caption.
yeah.
Need to write that down or what?
Wait, well, one last question. What advice would you have for me and Darian that you feel like you could give to us, knowing that we're in our 20s? Like, what would you like to know when you were in your 20s? That's something you could tell us.
So never settle, okay? Always look forward. I mean, Satchel Paige was a great pitcher in the Negro Leagues back in the 30s and 40s, and one of his favorite sayings was, "I never look backwards because somebody might be gaining on me." So you take that lesson and it's kind of like, you know, you got to move forward. You can't worry about what already happened. And young people have a lot of anxiety issues these days, and I get it because of the pressures, and people don't go in the backyards anymore and flip hamburgers and talk to their neighbors.
Yeah.
They're all on cell phones and social media, and they sit in their bedrooms or talking to friends and texting.
Yeah.
My advice is do more of this stuff, you know, getting out there and talking to people.
Right.
And never look backwards. I mean, because like Satchel Paige said, somebody might be gaining on you.
Right. And that's the danger with technology, I'd say, as a final thought. Everybody is so accustomed to convenience that our face is always on our screen because everything's there. The movies, the explosions, everything. And then when we look away from the phone, we see a person. And it's
Let me
like,
give you an example of an email that I got today. I get an email from a guy who's in the parking deck over near the county offices. And he's complaining because the two people in the county office did not come right over to help him. And you know what he said in his email? I was held up for 2 minutes. 2 minutes. So I emailed him back and I said, "You are emailing the mayor because you were inconvenienced for 2 minutes." I said, "Is that all your complaint is?" And he says, "Well, the other people just weren't doing their job." So this guy was inconvenienced for 2 minutes, and he thought it was time to email the mayor. Think about that for a moment.
wow.
You know, that's the proverbial, my cat's stuck in the tree, let me call the governor, see if he can solve the problem.
Yeah.
Makes no
Something
sense.
else.
2 minutes.
Makes no sense.
I'm glad we're on the good side of the coin today.
That's right.
Yeah. But man, thank you again. It was
Thank you for having
wonderful
me,
talking to
Darian,
you.
Thomas.
Yep.
I appreciate the opportunity to do this, and if you get any feedback, call Ruby and we'll answer the questions.
We
'Cause there'll be
definitely
somebody
will.
that'll say something negative.
Oh yeah, people are gonna love this and hate this, but that's just love anyway.
There you
Yeah.
go. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for stepping into the break room.